I'm going to invite up our first panel so that they get seated here behind me and tell you just a little bit about what they're going to cover. It says, whether you are a large stage company or a startup, you will gain invaluable insights from these successful entrepreneurs. They will cover the gamut from how to start and how to pick your partners to how to raise capital. Very important. The conversation will include why they see talent retention here in South Florida as the hotspot for an emerging technology and innovation center for the Americas. One of their greatest lessons is the idea that great companies are built great, not bought or sold. And so please welcome Stephen Cannella, the VP of Sales and co-founder of SoftLayer, Maurice Ferre, founding president and CEO of Mako Surgical Corp, and our moderator this morning for the next 30 minutes or so, Gustavo Albarelli, the managing director of Trident Capital. Gentlemen.
Great, we're just going to give a couple seconds here to have everyone get seated. But good morning. Wonderful, while we're waiting, it's wonderful to be here. I was born and raised in Miami in the Kendall area. I left in '96 and have been in Silicon Valley as a partner for the last 14 years, investing primarily in technology and technology-enabled services. I was fortunate enough to be able to make an investment in a South Florida company 3 years ago in March of 2011. That company was acquired by Akamai in February of 2014. It was called Prolexic Technologies. It was an IT security company. And coming back 3 years ago has really opened my eyes to the evolution of the technology ecosystem here in South Florida and in Miami, and the wonderful opportunities that are emerging and developing here. This morning, we're very fortunate to have two successful entrepreneurs that have, built, scaled, and sold their companies, and I look forward to asking them some questions and having them share their stories with you and lessons learned along the way. So to my immediate left is Maurice Ferre, and as the moderator said, or as the MC said, he was the founder and CEO of Mako, and maybe if you just want to give a little background on yourself. And to his left is Stephen Cannella, and he was part of the founding team of SoftLayer, and very happy to have them here. And maybe the first question is, how did you get started, and how are we here today?
Thanks, Gus, and I wanted to thank the organizers here for eMERGE. I think this is a wonderful venue for Miami. I'm excited to see all the activities and all the events that are here, and the momentum that is really starting to kick off. And there's just so many things that are so exciting here, being here in Miami, and what's going on here. And we talk a lot about what's going on in the application worlds, in the IT space. But another vibrant area here in the Miami area, the South Florida, is the medical device space. And I've been fortunate enough coming out as an MD from Boston and starting a company as a serial entrepreneur. Started my first company right out of, instead of going to residency, I started a company and I ran it for 10 years and sold it. Or we were bought by General Electric, and I worked 2 years at General Electric, and then I wanted to come back down here to South Florida to start up another company in the similar space in the medical device, and this time I picked robotics. We started looking at these different applications, and there's this huge trend going on about similar to what we're starting to see with a lot of these applications and mobile uses, where people are starting to talk about these things, or cloud computing, of using robots in the operating room. And so we licensed some technology primarily from MIT, but went around the country looking at different technologies when we started here in South Florida. And eventually, as the story progresses, fast forward, 10 years later, we built an orthopedic company that took 20% of the partial knee business in knee replacement, developing an application on hip, and a Fortune 300 company came around and said, look, you guys are moving way too fast. You grew your company way too fast, and we're really excited about your growth. We want to buy you for $1.65 billion. And it was just it was hard for me to say no. It was a, you know, as a founder of the company, it's like, my gosh, you know, and we had gone through the whole route of seed money, angel money. We went through the route of VCs. I was turned down by a lot of guys at Palo Alto that just said no to the thing. They wanted me to move the whole company to San Francisco. I said, oh my gosh, I really want to stay here in Miami. My wife will kill me. You know, I got 4 kids, and I said, no, we're going to stick it out. And then I went to New York and started meeting some investors and just fighting it every way, trying to figure out how to raise money and how to build this thing up. Long story short, I ended up raising $350 million. I had to go public in 2008, and it was crazy, but it was an incredible ride. And I think it's the beginnings of, you know, that for all those people that say you have to be certain places for different technologies, I think they're wrong. There's ways of doing it. And I'm happy to talk more about that detail, but that's the skinny.
Great. Stephen?
Thank you. Again, my name is Stephen Cannella. I'm the Vice President of Sales for IBM SoftLayer. And I also want to thank the organizers of this event for inviting me to speak on this panel. Being one of the co-founders of SoftLayer, it's really a privilege to sit here and be able to share with you guys some of the experiences that we went through starting the company. A little brief background on myself. I'm actually not from the Miami area, but I live in Dallas, Texas. Enjoy coming to South Florida as often as I can, though. I started out my professional career as a financial advisor, working in the brokerage industry, and took me a few years to realize that's not really what I wanted to do, and I was always intrigued by the idea of technology. And a gentleman that I was good personal friends with by the name of Lance Crosby kept trying to recruit me to come work for him at a company called The Planet. The Planet was primarily doing enterprise hosting, things like co-location, managed services, and whatnot. And I eventually did go ahead and go to work with Lance there. Worked there for a few years. Ultimately became the director of sales for The Planet. And over the course of time, Lance and I and a couple of other guys that were working at the company continued to talk about some of the challenges that we had with that organization and ways that we could think differently about how to deploy infrastructure. And so we eventually left The Planet and started SoftLayer. We started SoftLayer with the idea of creating an infrastructure as a service play. So thinking about how to pre-rack and stack servers and switches and routers into a data center in a method that would allow us to add an abstraction layer on top of that so that we could automate the provisioning of these products and services. So customers would no longer have to physically interact directly with the hardware itself. Again, we were just providing it to them as a service. At the time that we launched in 2005, we really didn't even know what to call ourselves in terms of the product or service we were providing. It wasn't until around 2007 that Amazon came along and described the exact same thing we were doing as cloud computing, so suddenly we were a cloud computing company. In the early days of SoftLayer, raising capital, raising funding was very difficult. We did not have a whole lot of success doing that, so it was a lot of our own money, a lot of credit cards, and a lot of sweating monthly payments there for a while. But ultimately, in the end, it ended up being a very large success for us. We sold the company for a couple of $1 billion to IBM in the summer of last year.
Great. Well, one of the questions that comes up over and over again is, when is the right time to raise capital? What do you look for in an investment partner? And I have the unenviable task of trying to lead you from the early days to exit, which took 9 and 10 years, in about 20 more minutes. So we'll kind of touch on this subject quickly and then keep going. But that's very much a question that from the audience has been heard over and over again. So it'd be wonderful to get your individual perspectives on that.
So, I mean, Gus, my view of it is so the first thing that you have to do, I think, is come up with your idea, right? And then in your idea, you have to iterate And it's an active plan. I always like looking at these things, business plans or strategic plans, as living documents. And once you kind of formulate that you think you have something, there's going to be those days that you just say, what am I doing? Why did I do this? And I think from a personal perspective, you're gonna feel, boy, did I leave that big job? Maybe I'm crazy. I'm not cut out for this type of stuff. But you got to keep on iterating and iterating. And one of the things that I found that was really productive was getting in front of venture capitalists as much as you can, and starting off with kind of the low-hanging fruit, people that are accessible, that aren't maybe on the top of the pecking order, and let them challenge you and just listen to the story, and you keep on building that up. And I, in my experience, when I first started pitching, when I went out to Silicon Valley and into Boston to present the story, by the time I got to my 5th VC meeting, I completely changed the business. And so that's number one, is like you got to kind of, that's one tip that I would say is really important. The other thing that I would say is that when you have an opportunity to raise money, especially if you have a big story, raise it. Don't think twice about it. I, for the life of me, never expected to raise $350 million. But that's what it took to take 20% of a market, to build 500 employees in a company, to become the fastest growing company in North America in 2011, according to Deloitte & Touche. It took that type of capital and that type of tenacity. So I was always on the circuit, figuring out, where I'm going to get more money, how I'm going to pull this off, and then eventually that led to Series B, Series C, and then that was a very important impasse in 2008 when I realized that I had raised $50 million of VC money, and I said, this is going to take a lot more money. And I said, I got to get public. And there I was trying to figure out, how to do that. So talking to the smart bankers, getting in front of them, hearing their stories. And it's never too early, believe it or not. I mean, we had less than $100,000 in revenue when we went public. And we went out public at about a $100 million market cap. So we made an incredible amount of money for a lot of people. And even though the bankers and everybody tells you no, I mean, I remember a story that I had JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley as my lead bankers. And like right at the end, on my way out, the lead banker was saying, Bernanke's going to talk and he's going to mess things up and the market's going to be crazy. We got to wait another week. And I said, no, we're going out now. And he said, well, I can't do it. So I went with the other bankers. And from the airport, I said, we're going to the other bank. And those are the type of things that you got to do. So I went over there and we got it done. And I was hoping that we would get out at, the price, our pricing was kind of set at, $15. And I said that was perfect. And I was, flying over to Chicago. We had a full book and they were going, oh my gosh, this is great, high-fi. And then all of a sudden, some of the lead guys started pulling out and there was a death spiral, and then we ended up at $10. And they said, do you want to take it, yes or no? I said, yes, let's take it. We raised $50 million. And then I had to go back into the market through very rough times. But the message is, for me, in terms of raising money, whether it's early or whether it's late or in the middle, always refine your story, really test it out, listen carefully to what people are telling you, go with your gut, and always be in the mode of raising more capital.
Stephen?
Well, so from my perspective on the software side, earlier I mentioned it was very difficult for us to raise capital in the early days. But the one thing I would stress is that as you're going through the process, as you're trying to raise capital, as you're trying to talk to these VC companies, as Marie said, make sure that you have your story down pat. Make sure that you've got your entire portfolio from a product standpoint well-defined, because these guys will start pecking away at it. And if you don't have all of the answers to the questions that they start asking, it's gonna become difficult to get them to invest money in your company. I have a little bit of a different perspective, I think, than what Maurice has in terms of raising capital. I actually think it was fortunate that SoftLayer had difficulty raising capital in the early days because it allowed us to control more of the company for a longer period of time. And the way we were able to continue growing the company was our business is very hardware intensive. You have to go out and spend a lot of capital to buy hardware. So what we ended up doing was we created lease lines of credit where we were leasing the hardware instead of us having to go out and spend our own cash to buy that hardware. And then over time, as the VCs started recognizing, wow, these guys really do have a great business model. They did know what they were talking about when they came to speak to us 3 or 4 years ago. Then they did want to start investing money. And that put us in the driver's seat because now we had a proven business model. We had revenues. We were actually making money. And that gave us the ability to be very picky about who we wanted to choose as a partner from a VC standpoint. So I would encourage you to take money, but take money at the right time. You don't want to try and take money and be in a vulnerable position where you're going to lose control over your company, because ultimately it's your baby. It's something that you're proud of. It's something that you started, and you want to make sure that you control the direction of it for as long as possible. In 2010. We did start to take our first outside money. A VC actually purchased a controlling stake in SoftLayer and merged SoftLayer with another company called The Planet, which ironically I had worked at before. And we merged the two companies together and then really started accelerating our growth from there. And around early 2013, maybe late 2012, our VC had kind of gotten uncomfortable with the amount of growth that we had achieved. It was to the point where we had gotten to the size that was really outside of their comfort zone for their portfolio. Our revenues were about $430 million at the time, and we agreed together that we would start looking for other opportunities or alternatives for SoftLayer moving forward. One of the key things that we were looking for from an exit strategy standpoint was we wanted to make sure that whoever we went with, SoftLayer was going to continue to exist. We didn't want to sell the company and have SoftLayer, have our baby just get completely destroyed. We spent too much time and effort, had too much pride in what we built. And we had a couple of suitors that came and talked to us. And again, because we had been very successful, because we had waited and proven ourselves to the marketplace, we were in control. We had the ability to pick and choose who our suitors were. IBM came to us with a compelling story about how they wanted to put an enormous amount of focus on SoftLayer and sell SoftLayer's infrastructure directly to their customers, but also build other IBM properties, like their SaaS properties, their PaaS properties, their business processing services on top of SoftLayer. So we thought, what better way to help take SoftLayer to the next level, but at the same time be able to achieve some reward for what we had built over the past several years. So ultimately, that's what we chose to do, was to let IBM acquire us, and it's been very exciting since then.
That's great. Another area that people have been asking a lot about is, whether it's in South Florida or in Dallas or frankly anywhere, but hiring, recruiting, retaining talent, especially technical talent, can be very challenging. Maybe share some thoughts around that.
Sure. I like to think things big, right? I think there's I like transformational stuff, right? So when I come up with a plan, and now I've done it twice, I really want to capture the imagination of my customer. In Mako's case, the big storyboard was, we have a large market. There's a lot of people out there that are suffering from diseases, and they have to have this surgery. And what better way? We've seen automation in the automotive industry, in the industrial industry, but not in the operating room. Doesn't it make sense, doctor, to start thinking about a digital tool to conceptualize and to transform the operating room into a digital world through robotics and advanced cutting instruments, so that when you put those implants in the body, they're done with such high precision. And that translates into prove it. And we spent a lot of time, I got the best clinical people in the world to kind of demonstrate that precision in placement of implants that stay in your body for 30 plus years matters. And then all of a sudden you start getting that body of wealth, right? So but that was the big idea. Once you have that big idea, whatever it is in whatever industry, you got to think through it, right? And you got to have the data to kind of help you build the data or kind of support where the data is and kind of build that up. Once you kind of get that story, the big headline story of what you're trying to do, that's $1 billion idea. The next thing you really have to do is you have to share that vision and articulate that vision. And I think I am a proponent that it can be done anywhere. So whether it's in Palo Alto or here, it doesn't matter. It just, you can create that ecosystem within your venue. And yes, there's challenges, and everybody can argue this and that. There's a bigger talent pool. There's universities. Our universities here are fantastic. FIU is an amazing place. University of Miami, the engineering department at FIU. I mean, we've been able to recruit so much talent here locally, and everybody gets excited. We had over 500 employees. We had over 100 engineers that we were able to kind of recruit and attract here in South Florida. And it really starts with the leader kind of giving that vision, telling that story, and then from there you build all the pieces. You build your teams, your management teams, you build your incentive programs around it, but don't get caught up with all of the other stuff. Everything comes in sequence. It comes in pieces, right? So all those things, oh my gosh, how am I going to deal with HR? How am I going to deal with this? How am I going to deal with that? Don't worry about those things. Build up the story in the beginning. Create that great feeling, that emotional feeling, that vision feeling of why this is the best thing since sliced bread. And then little by little, everything will start coming together. And that's how we approach our markets. And we were able to attract people from all over the world. And because they wanted to be a part of this big story.
So I would agree with Maurice. I think having the big story and having the vision is critical when you're trying to recruit talent. When you're talking to potential candidates and they can see the energy in the management team that's recruiting them, then it's immensely helpful in terms of trying to get those folks on board. So, creating a work environment where people love to come in and work every day is critical. If you don't have that, you're constantly going to be cycling in and out of folks. And that's something that we strive to achieve. We tried to make it as fun of a work atmosphere as possible, while at the same time making sure that business got done. We had a motto of work hard, play hard. And that's exactly what we did. We would all work together. We worked together as a team. We targeted people who we felt were going to be able to work well together and not be more concerned about their own individual goals or their own individual agendas. And ultimately, I think we built one of the best teams in our industry that helped us succeed. But again, you have to make sure that in terms of retaining your talent, you have to make sure that they love their job. You have to give them a reason to come in every day. Sure, you got to pay them well. Sure, you got to make sure and give them some kind of potential equity in the company. When you're smaller, they're going to take a risk to come into a startup, obviously, so you want to provide them some equity. But more than anything else, you want them to love waking up out of bed and coming into work every single day.
So kind of a follow-up question to that is, as you're laying out the big vision, you're recruiting employees, are you thinking about an exit strategy day one? Are you thinking about going public, getting acquired? how were you thinking about, building the company?
So Gus, I mean, in our example, I think the introduction is great companies aren't sold, they're bought. I truly believe that. We weren't looking to get acquired. I really still have a strong conviction that, this, given the continuous growth of what Mako was doing, that in a period of 10 years, I think our value would have gone from probably $1.6 billion to between $10 to $15 billion. Why? Because we cornered the IP space, we cornered the robotic space, we cornered the software development space, the various applications that we were developing, the platform space. We built the story, and it was gaining a lot of momentum. And that's why, when someone comes in and says, you know what, I'm going to buy you for 14 to 16x multiple off your revenue, it's hard to say no, because that's just such a remarkable, where the industry standard was like a 4x. I mean, companies in our space are bought at revenues, growth stories are bought at 4x. And here we are at 14 to 16x multiples. I mean, it's crazy. So it's a great company. You know that what you call your baby is like all of a sudden in the hands. As I said it to my kids when they explain, why did you do this? This is all you do. You've been going to work every day and on the planes and everything. So why are you doing this? And as I explained to my kids, I said, well, first of all, it's like having a baby, right? You go through infancy and you kind of think about it, and you just think of all the great things as an infant, and then all of a sudden the toddler years kind of come in, and you're kind of formatting it and you're building it up, and you're kind of getting all excited about it, and then, oh my gosh, then they become adolescents, and you go through the trials and tribulations of adolescence, and it's like unbelievable. Then they go off to college, and they kind of rediscover themselves and stuff like that. But they're still rambunctious, and then all of a sudden they meet somebody. I say that's what happened, right? My baby girl, got married, and she married really well. She married in air. How I can't be. That's pretty good, So I mean, that's the way I kind of look at it.
So I would agree with Maurice in the respect of you can't start the business with the idea of, okay, I'm going to exit in 2 or 3 years. I think if you do, that's going to control too much of your decision making, and it's going to affect your ability to deliver a quality product and service. And it's going to be transparent to your customers. I think it would be very easy for your customers to pick up on that as well too. So when we started SoftLayer, obviously we had dreams of making money one day, but that was something that was so far off into the future. We were just trying to make sure we could pay our credit card bills off for all the money we were putting on them to get the company started. But I love Maurice's analogy about it being your child, and it matures over time. And then, obviously it gets to a certain level where you need to kind of let it go and see where it can grow from there. But it's been a truly wonderful experience to have gone through that cycle with the company and see it continue to flourish within the IBM system today.
Well, we've essentially run out of time, but I did want to, if there were any questions, we can maybe take one, maybe two, if anyone has any questions for the panelists.
Yes, thank you. I have a question. In terms of, you speak that your baby is moving into a bigger house, so to speak. I would like to understand, maybe you could get into a few details into how much of your team actually moved into these larger companies, and how the whole culture clash, because you spoke about having a fun and work atmosphere and something that you've built, and obviously you'll try to carry that on, but you're moving into very, very distinct, larger spaces, more structure. So how's the whole culture aspect of these transitions? Thank you.
Well, that's a great question, and I think from my perspective, our acquisition happened in December, so we're 4 months into it now, and I'm happy to say that Stryker, as a Fortune 300 company, is really in the cusp of they have a mindset of decentralization, which I think is a great thing, right? So they really believe that these companies that they acquire really need to flourish. And I know, talking to, Kevin Lobo, who's the CEO of Stryker, he's a remarkable individual, remarkable leader, and really has come down and spent a lot of time. The Mako acquisition is a major acquisition for Stryker. It's a $10 billion company in revenues. It's a big deal for them, and it's important to them because it really kind of creates what will be in the industry where there's 3 players and each have the same amount of market share. This is their way of being able to really gain enormous market share and presence in a very large and fast-growing industry in terms of joint replacements specifically, so the amount of I think that in our perspective, the dollar amount. I've gone through it 2 ways. When GE bought us, they didn't pay a lot of money. When Stryker bought us, they paid a lot of money. But I would say, Kevin says they didn't pay a lot of money, and I'm happy he says that. And I actually agree with him. I think that in the end of the story, this is going to be. I think we're going to see 90% of joint replacements being done robotically, and Kevin's got it. He's cornered it. So I think it commands the respect of the organization. So in our case, there's a lot of attention being paid to make sure that this is done right. And what they want to do and what they've instilled, and it's talk the talk and walk the walk, is maintain the culture. And a lot of our cultures on innovation, it's really around our engineering folks and how we're really in the forefront of all the collaborations around the world, all the best robotic programs around the world, where we've brought them in here and created those collaborations and been able to kind of just turn out innovation in that space. And as I walk around 4 months later, as I did yesterday, saying and greeting my employees, my former employees, they're there. They're excited about it. They're excited that they've got a bigger platform to play in. There's just so many things that are opening up, and they're embracing it. They're incorporating with some of their efforts around the world. So there's a lot. There's ideas about expansions into other markets, into other spaces that they're working on. So that's at the engineering level. At the upper management level, there's been a lot of retention. A lot of my team has stuck around. From my perspective personally, I'm the type of person that's just, I really want this to go really well, but I know myself, and I'm more of a serial entrepreneur. I'm not the type of person that can work in large companies, So my job was done, and I was able to kind of get through the transition. But a lot of my team members are still there. They're going to be there. They're excited about it. So far, so good.
So I know we're running out of time. Do you have 30 seconds for Stephen to?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Again, going back to our scenario, we were in the driver's seat in terms of picking our suitor. So we were able to look into the situation and see who we thought was going to be the best fit for us culturally, as you mentioned, but also the opportunity for our employees to continue with a long-term career inside of that organization. We didn't want to pick someone who we knew was just going to end up laying off our entire workforce over the course of the next 12 months. We cared about our employees too much to let something like that happen. So with IBM, because we knew they wanted to put such a focus on the software product inside of their portfolio, we knew that we were going to be critical to them so that they would need to maintain as many of our employees as possible. In fact, they offered us a pretty nice incentive to make sure that as many of our employees stuck around as possible. So I think it really comes down to picking the right match for you when you're looking at your exit versus just taking the first one that comes along that may not be the best fit for your employees going forward.
Great. Well, with that, we're out of time, but I'd like to thank Maurice and Stephen for their time today. I'd like to thank the eMERGE Americas Foundation, Manny Medina, the vision, and thank you guys, because you're the ones that are really making the South Florida tech ecosystem grow and thrive. And you know, I certainly have made one investment in South Florida, and I know that Trident Capital and I are looking forward to making more. So thank you very much.